The biting wind whipped through the Transylvanian countryside, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. It was late autumn in 1704, and a pervasive chill had settled over the small village of Valea Întunecată, Dark Valley. Nestled amidst rolling hills and shadowed forests, the village rarely saw outsiders. Its inhabitants a close-knit community bound by tradition and a healthy dose of superstition. Within one of the village's more modest dwellings, a small wooden cabin with smoke curling lazily from its chimney, lay Anya. Her face, usually vibrant with life, was pale and etched with a weariness that belied her 22 years. For days, she had been in labor, the cries that escaped her lips growing fainter with each passing hour. Old Marta, the village midwife, a woman whose hands held the wisdom of generations, moved around the room with practiced efficiency, her brow furrowed with concern. Anya's husband, Stefan, a sturdy farmer with calloused hands and worried eyes, paced anxiously outside. The villagers, their faces grim, stood a respectful distance away, their hushed whispers carried away by the relentless wind. This pregnancy had been different from Anya's first, which had brought them a healthy son, now a rambunctious toddler. This time, Anya had carried a heavy weight, her belly swollen to an unusual size, hinting at twins. As the hours crawled by, the atmosphere in the small cabin grew heavy with apprehension. The usual sounds of the village, the bleating of sheep, the distant bark of a dog, seemed muted, as if nature itself held its breath. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, a weak cry pierced the silence. Marta emerged, her expression a mixture of relief and something akin to bewilderment. "It is a boy," she announced, her voice low. Stefan rushed inside, his heart pounding in his chest. He knelt beside Anya, whose face was now damp with sweat, but held a flicker of relief. The baby, small but seemingly healthy, was wrapped tightly in a linen cloth. But the ordeal was not over. Marta's grave expression told them as much. The second birth was proving difficult, the contractions weak and irregular. Anya's strength was waning, and a palpable fear settled over the room. After another agonizing hour, a second cry, even weaker than the first, echoed through the cabin. Marta held up the second infant, and a collective gasp filled the room. It was another boy, even smaller and more fragile than his brother. But it wasn't his size that caused the villagers' shock. It was the chilling anomaly that Marta, after a moment of stunned silence, whispered about. This child, impossibly, had been born without a heartbeat. Panic rippled through the small gathering. How could a child be born without a heart? It defied everything they knew, everything they believed. Marta, despite her years of experience, had never witnessed anything like it. She examined the infant closely, her experienced fingers probing his tiny chest, finding only stillness. Yet, inexplicably, the child lived, his shallow breaths the only sign of life. As darkness enveloped Valea Întunecată, casting long, eerie shadows, the mystery of the heartless twin deepened, a chilling enigma that would soon grip the entire village in fear and speculation. The news of the twins spread through Valea Întunecată like wildfire. Whispers followed Stefan and Anya wherever they went, their joy at the birth of their sons overshadowed by the unsettling anomaly of the second child. Villagers would stop and stare, their faces a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. Some crossed themselves, muttering prayers under their breath, while others openly speculated about divine punishment or dark omens. Old man Grigor, the village elder and self-proclaimed expert on folklore and superstitions, declared that such a birth was an unnatural occurrence, a sign of something deeply amiss. He spoke of ancient legends, of beings born incomplete, touched by shadow, and warned that allowing such a child to live could bring misfortune upon the entire community. His pronouncements, delivered with grave authority, fueled the growing unease. Despite the fear and suspicion surrounding their second son, Stefan and Anya clung fiercely to both their children. They named the firstborn Matei, meaning gift of God, and the second, the heartless twin, they named Ciprian, a name that held no particular significance but sounded gentle on their lips. Anya nursed them both, her maternal instincts overriding the villagers' apprehension. Matei thrived, his tiny hands grasping his mother's finger, his cries strong and healthy. Ciprian, however, remained frail, his breathing shallow, his skin almost translucent. Yet he lived, defying the very laws of nature as they understood them. Dr. Elias Popescu, the closest physician, lived several days' ride away in the larger town of Sibiu. Stefan, desperate for answers, made the arduous journey, hoping the doctor could offer some explanation, some cure. Dr. Popescu, a man of science and reason, listened intently to Stefan's frantic account, his brow furrowing in disbelief. He had heard of rare congenital defects, but never anything resembling a child born without a heart. Upon Stefan's return, accompanied by the skeptical Dr. Popescu, the village buzzed with anticipation. Dr. Popescu examined Ciprian with meticulous care, his instruments cold against the infant's delicate skin. He listened intently to his chest, finding only silence where a heartbeat should have been. His medical knowledge offered no explanation, leaving him baffled and intrigued. "It is impossible," he finally declared, shaking his head. "There is no medical explanation for this child's survival." His words, meant to convey his scientific bewilderment, only served to deepen the villagers' sense of the uncanny. The doctor's inability to explain Ciprian's condition solidified their belief that something unnatural was at play. As days turned into weeks, Ciprian continued to live, a silent, enigmatic presence in the small cabin. He rarely cried, his large dark eyes often open, seemingly observing the world around him with an unnerving stillness. The mystery of the heartless twin cast a long shadow over Valea Întunecată, a constant reminder of the inexplicable forces that lay beyond their understanding. Life in the small timbered cabin of Stefan and Anya settled into a strange, unnerving routine. Each sunrise brought a fresh wave of quiet trepidation, a stark contrast to the bustling rhythms of a typical farming household. Anya, her face often pale with exhaustion but her eyes burning with an unwavering maternal love, devoted herself tirelessly to her sons. Her care for Matei was instinctual, filled with the usual joy of a new mother. He grew stronger each day, a typical demanding infant, his robust gurgles and insistent cries filling the small space with familiar sounds of life. Ciprian, however, remained a fragile enigma, a silent, almost ethereal presence who required constant, meticulous care, but offered little to no outward response, his existence a continuous, unsettling question mark. Stefan, once a jovial and well-regarded member of the community, found himself increasingly isolated. The other villagers, while never openly hostile, maintained a palpable distance. Their interactions with him were strained, uncomfortable, punctuated by nervous glances and hushed whispers that ceased abruptly whenever he drew near. He could practically feel their fear, a suffocating blanket, and the unspoken accusations hung heavy in the damp air, accusing him perhaps of harboring something unnatural, something cursed. Even his closest friends, once quick to offer a helping hand or share a drink, seemed hesitant to linger in his presence, their eyes often drifting nervously towards the small cabin, towards the crib where the heartless twin lay, a chilling emblem of the inexplicable. Desperate for any understanding, any glimmer of sense in their impossible situation, Stefan, against his better judgment, revisited old man Grigore. He found the elder hunched over his hearth, the firelight casting long dancing shadows that seemed to animate his ancient weathered face. Stefan hoped to glean some insight from the village elder's vast, albeit superstitious knowledge of folklore. Grigore, His voice raspy with age and grave conviction, recounted chilling tales of changelings, of children stolen and swapped by malevolent forest spirits, born incomplete or bearing some indelible mark of the other world. He spoke of dark omens, of rituals to ward off evil, and of protective charms, his words painting a vivid, dark, and profoundly unsettling picture of forces beyond human comprehension. While Stefan, a practical farmer, didn't fully believe in these superstitions, the utter lack of any rational scientific explanation for Ciprian's inexplicable condition left him vulnerable, a chink in his armor of reason that allowed the seeds of dread to take root. As the seasons inexorably shifted and the unforgiving winter tightened its icy grip on Valea Întunecată, the relentless strain on Anya began to show. The constant worry, the countless sleepless nights spent watching Ciprian's shallow breaths, and the crushing weight of social isolation took a heavy toll on her spirit and her body. Her movements became slower, her smile rarer. Yet, through it all, she never faltered in her fierce, protective care for her sons. She would hold Ciprian close against her chest, whispering ancient Romanian lullabies, her warmth and her love seemingly the only true comfort he knew in his silent, unresponsive world. Sometimes, in the quiet solitude of the night, she would swear she felt a faint, almost imperceptible stirring against her chest, a subtle, defiant response that defied every known law of life, a silent ripple of connection that utterly defied his lack of a heartbeat. It was a fleeting sensation easily dismissed, but it fueled a quiet, desperate hope within her. Dr. Popescu, a man of empirical reason yet deeply intrigued and profoundly troubled by what he had witnessed, returned to Valea Întunecată several weeks later, braving the worsening weather. He arrived with a small, heavy collection of medical texts from Sibiu, rare volumes for a rural doctor. He spent hours poring over them by the dim, flickering light of the cabin's fire, his brow furrowed in concentration, searching for any mention of a similar case, any obscure anomaly, any clue that might possibly explain the impossible existence of Ciprian. He found nothing. The entire medical world as he knew it, with all its accumulated knowledge, offered no answers, no precedent, no logical framework for this child's survival. His repeated visits, however, driven by a desperate scientific curiosity, did little to quell the villagers' fears. In fact, they exacerbated them. Some interpreted his continued, almost obsessive interest in Ciprian as further, horrifying proof that the child was indeed something unnatural, something to be deeply feared, a harbinger of ill fortune. The very thin, fragile line between scientific inquiry and superstitious dread blurred entirely, deepening the village's collective anxieties into a simmering, dangerous resentment. The cabin became a pariah, a place of silent terror. One particularly harsh winter evening, as a furious blizzard raged outside, its icy tendrils trapping the villagers firmly within their homes, a chilling silence descended upon the cabin. Ciprian's already shallow breathing grew even fainter, almost imperceptible. Anya held him tightly, her heart clutched in the icy grip of profound fear. Stefan watched helplessly, his face a mask of agony, the crushing weight of the unknown pressing down on him, suffocating him. In the terrifying stillness of the storm, amidst the howling wind and the crackling fire, the only discernible sound was the frantic, healthy rhythm of Matei's vibrant breathing beside them, a stark, agonizing contrast to the almost imperceptible ghostly breaths of his twin brother, the boy born without a heart, who stubbornly, impossibly clung to life, a living paradox in the heart of the storm. The harsh, unforgiving winter months tested the resilience of Anya and Stefan to their absolute limits. The isolation from the village intensified with each fresh snowfall, transforming their small cabin into an island in a sea of fear and ice. Resources, already scarce, dwindled even further, adding another layer of silent desperation to their daily lives. Yet amidst the profound hardship, their bond with both their sons deepened, forged in the crucible of adversity. Matei, now crawling with surprising speed and babbling incoherent but joyful sounds, brought precious moments of much-needed warmth, laughter, and a fragile sense of normalcy to the cabin, his innocence a stark contrast to the surrounding gloom. Ciprian remained a delicate shadow, a silent, unmoving presence, his continued existence a constant source of both profound wonder and gnawing unease. Dr. Popescu, a man of science utterly undeterred by the complete lack of medical precedent for Ciprian's condition, continued his arduous visits whenever the treacherous weather allowed. His curiosity had long since transcended mere professional interest. It had become an almost obsessive pursuit of an impossible truth. He began to document Ciprian's condition meticulously, his hands moving with practiced precision, recording every minute detail, his irregular breathing patterns, his subtle, almost imperceptible reactions, or striking lack thereof, to various stimuli, and his overall physical development. While Ciprian's growth was significantly slower and his body far more fragile than Matei's, he was undeniably, impossibly alive. This phenomenon defied all known logical and scientific understanding, fueling Dr. Popescu's intense, almost feverish curiosity. He found himself increasingly open to considering the possibility of physiological mechanisms beyond current medical knowledge, a radical notion that both profoundly intrigued and deeply unsettled him, pushing him to the very edge of his conventional training. Old man Grigor, his ancient eyes glinting with a chilling certainty, witnessed Ciprian's continued impossible survival as indisputable proof of a more sinister, malevolent force at play. He openly declared that whatever sustained the child was not natural, not of God, and that allowing it to remain in the village, to fester among them, was inviting greater darkness, bringing divine wrath upon the entire community. His pronouncements became more frequent, more passionate, and terrifyingly more dire, transforming whispered suspicions into fervent conviction, further isolating Stefan and Anya into a lonely, fearful existence. The villagers, once neighbors, now viewed them with a blend of pity and outright terror. One crisp spring morning, as the last stubborn patches of snow finally began to recede, revealing the mud-soaked earth beneath, a group of villagers, their faces grim and determined, approached Stefan's cabin. They were emboldened by Grigor's relentless fear-mongering warnings and their own mounting visceral fear. They carried torches even in daylight and crudely fashioned pitchforks, their intent clear and chillingly unmistakable. They believed with a terrifying certainty that Ciprian was an unnatural threat that needed to be eliminated for the very safety and soul of the village, a necessary evil for their survival. Stefan, hearing the ominous crunch of their boots on the thawing ground and the low murmur of their angry voices, rushed to stand defiantly in front of his door, his body a desperate shield. Anya clutched both children tightly behind him, her face a mask of terror. He pleaded with his neighbors, his voice hoarse with desperation, arguing that Ciprian was his son, a defenseless, fragile infant who had done no harm, no evil. He spoke of their profound love for both their children, of their simple hopes and dreams for their future, of their shared humanity. The villagers, however, were deaf to his pleas, their minds swayed by the suffocating weight of fear and ingrained superstition. Grigor, his eyes burning with a fervent, terrifying conviction, stepped forward, his voice resonating with an almost prophetic authority. "This creature is not of God, Stefan," he declared, his arms sweeping in a condemning gesture towards the cabin. "It is an abomination, a mockery of life, and its continued presence will bring ruin, pestilence, and damnation upon us all." The implicit threat in his words hung heavy in the air. Just as the terrifying situation seemed about to escalate into irreversible violence, a sudden thundering sound of hooves broke through the tension. Dr. Popescu arrived, his horse panting from a hurried, desperate ride, its flanks slick with sweat. He dismounted swiftly, his medical bag, a symbol of logic and healing, slung over his shoulder. With remarkable courage, he stepped directly between Stefan and the angry, torch-wielding villagers, his presence a stark barrier against their rising fury. "Stop!" he commanded, his voice surprisingly firm and resonating with an unexpected authority that momentarily cut through the villagers' anger. "You are acting out of ignorance and irrational fear. This child may be an anomaly, an inexplicable wonder, but he is still a human being. Let us try to understand this, not resort to violence that you will forever regret." His unexpected, courageous intervention momentarily stunned the villagers into silence. Dr. Popescu, though an outsider, was respected, albeit grudgingly, for his knowledge and his unwavering rational approach. He argued, his voice calm but resolute, that they could not condemn what they did not understand, could not resort to barbarity. Slowly, painstakingly, he managed to persuade them to disperse, promising to continue his intense investigation into Ciprian's condition and to share any findings, however unsettling they might be. The standoff left Stefan and Anya profoundly shaken, their bodies trembling, but overwhelmingly grateful for Dr. Popescu's timely, life-saving arrival. The immediate threat had receded, but the underlying menace, the chilling prejudice, lingered like a cold mist, a stark and terrifying reminder of the deep-seated fear their son's impossible condition had ignited within their own community. The question remained, for how long could they protect their heartless son from the fear of a world that refused to understand him? Please subscribe to the channel to continue this unsettling story of the twins born in Romania. Remember, this is a work of fiction. Following the terrifying confrontation at their cabin door, an uneasy, fragile truce settled over Valea Întunecată. The villagers, though dispersed, remained profoundly wary of Ciprian, their fear a palpable undercurrent in every hushed conversation. Dr. Popescu's intervention had at least averted immediate violence, but it had not extinguished the embers of suspicion. Stefan and Anya continued their lonely vigil, caring for their sons, but the shadow of the village's fear remained a constant, oppressive presence in their lives, a silent, pervasive threat. Dr. Popescu, now more determined than ever to unravel the mystery of Ciprian, intensified his observations. He dedicated hours to studying the infant, his scientific mind buzzing with possibilities that defied conventional understanding. He noted that while Ciprian did not react to external stimuli in the robust, immediate way Mate did, no startled cries or grasping reflexes, there were indeed subtle, almost imperceptible signs of awareness. His large, dark eyes would sometimes appear to follow movement in the room, albeit slowly, and he would occasionally make faint, almost ghostly, imperceptible sounds, like tiny wisps of breath. His breathing, though still shallow and incredibly irregular, remained remarkably consistent, a constant, baffling defiance of biological impossibility. One sun-drenched afternoon, as Dr. Popescu conducted one of his routine, meticulous examinations of Ciprian, he noticed a faint, almost ethereal bluish discoloration just beneath the infant's translucent skin in his chest area. His heart quickened with a professional curiosity he hadn't felt in years. Upon closer, almost obsessive inspection with his magnifying glass, he discovered a complex network of delicate, thread-like vessels just beneath the surface. They seemed to pulse faintly, an almost imperceptible undulation, though there was absolutely no discernible heartbeat. This observation baffled him profoundly, pushing him to the very edge of his medical knowledge. Could these minute vessels be performing some rudimentary, heretofore unknown circulatory function? It was a revolutionary, almost heretical possibility that stretched the limits of his entire medical understanding, a notion that dared to challenge centuries of anatomical wisdom. Driven by this incredible discovery, Dr. Popescu began to correspond with extreme caution with colleagues in distant universities. He crafted his letters meticulously, carefully omitting specific alarming details that might invite outright ridicule or utter disbelief. Instead, he framed his inquiries broadly, seeking any information on unusual congenital conditions or obscure physiological anomalies that might shed light on a child sustaining life without a heart. The responses he received, when they came at all, were uniformly negative. No one, not a single physician or anatomist in his network, had ever encountered or even heard of a child born without a heart surviving for more than a few moments. Ciprian was, it seemed, truly unique, a solitary paradox. Meanwhile, in the quiet cabin, Matej continued to grow and develop at a normal, healthy pace. He was a curious and active toddler, exploring his small world with boundless, infectious energy. He would often crawl or toddle over to his twin brother's cradle, his small hands reaching out with innocent curiosity to touch his seemingly lifeless sibling. This simple, pure interaction was a stark, poignant contrast to the fearful apprehension and superstitious dread of the adults around them. Anya, her heart aching yet hopeful, actively encouraged this interaction, desperate to foster a bond between the two boys, a thread of connection despite their vastly different conditions. As summer finally arrived, bringing a deceptive warmth and the sweet scent of blooming wildflowers to the valley, Stefan found some solace in the demanding rhythm of his farm work. The strenuous physical labor provided a temporary, much-needed respite from the constant, gnawing worry and the heavy silence that permeated his home. However, the hushed whispers and averted gazes in the village market remained a painful, constant reminder of their enduring ostracization, a silent condemnation that cut deeper than any spoken word. One particularly serene evening, as dusk settled over the valley, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Dr. Popescu observed Anya holding both twins. Matej was nestled comfortably in her arms, already drifting off to sleep, his breathing deep and even. Ciprian, however, lay more limply against her chest, a fragile, almost weightless form. As Anya hummed a soft, ancient lullaby, her voice a soothing balm, a remarkable, almost miraculous thing happened. Ciprian's tiny hand, which usually remained utterly still, unnaturally so for an infant, slowly, deliberately, reached out and gently grasped a lock of Anya's hair. It was a fleeting gesture, lasting only a breath, but both Anya and Dr. Popescu saw it, their eyes widening in disbelief and wonder. Tears welled up in Anya's eyes, a complex mixture of profound relief and an almost unbearable sadness. It was a sign, however small, however inexplicable, of connection, of life, of a conscious presence within her heartless child. Dr. Popescu, witnessing this impossible, breathtaking moment, felt a renewed, fierce sense of urgency. There was something truly extraordinary, something beyond comprehension happening with this child, something that utterly defied the known laws of biology and anatomy. He knew with a certainty that transcended scientific method that he had to delve deeper, to understand the intricate, unseen physiological mechanisms or perhaps even non-physical forces that allowed Ciprian to survive. But he also knew, with a chilling dread, that time might be incredibly limited, as Ciprian remained unbelievably fragile, living on the very precipice of existence. The mystery of the heartless twin was far from solved. In fact, with each passing day, with each new impossible observation, it seemed to be deepening, spiraling into a terrifying, boundless unknown. Dr. Popescu, a man of science perpetually on the precipice of a groundbreaking discovery or a profound failure, found his resolve hardening. The rustic conditions of Stefan and Anya's cabin, with its dim light and limited instruments, were simply insufficient for the meticulous examination Ciprian desperately needed. He harbored a growing conviction that Ciprian was not merely a medical anomaly, but perhaps the key to understanding a fundamental truth about life itself. With a quiet urgency, he proposed a daring plan to Stefan and Anya. He would take Ciprian to Sibiu, where his personal residence offered a more controlled environment, and he had discreet access to advanced, for the 18th century, medical tools, and, crucially, a small, private library. This library held not only contemporary medical texts, but also ancient tomes on anatomy and physiology, some of which delved into theories long since dismissed by mainstream science. Stefan and Anya were caught between a desperate hope and a crippling fear. The thought of their fragile son, so vulnerable and unique, being exposed to the outside world, where he was already viewed with suspicion and dread, was agonizing. The whispers in Valea Întunecată, the fearful glances, the outright accusations, they had all left deep scars. Yet Dr. Popescu's earnest demeanor and tireless dedication offered a sliver of hope. They had seen his genuine concern, his unwavering commitment to understanding Ciprian, unlike the fearful villagers. After a long, silent deliberation, punctuated only by the soft breathing of their sleeping sons, they reluctantly agreed. Their yearning for an answer, for some scientific explanation that might alleviate the village's fear and their own gnawing uncertainty, outweighed the immense risk. The journey to Sibiu was an ordeal. The mountain roads were treacherous, even in the mild weather, and Dr. Popescu cradled Ciprian with painstaking care, his gaze fixed on the faint rise and fall of the infant's chest. Every bump of the cart, every gust of wind, seemed a threat to the child's precarious existence. Upon their arrival in Sibiu, Dr. Popescu bypassed the bustling town square, taking a circuitous route to his secluded residence on the outskirts. He ushered Ciprian into a quiet, sunlit room, far from curious eyes, a sanctuary where he could conduct his study in complete secrecy. Here, with magnifying glasses, rudimentary stethoscopes, and a collection of delicate probes, he embarked on the most perplexing case of his career. He meticulously examined the network of subcutaneous vessels on Ciprian's chest. Under the stronger light, they appeared even more intricate, a delicate bluish lace just beneath the translucent skin, seemingly pulsing with an almost imperceptible rhythm. Dr. Popescu theorized, his mind racing, that these vessels might be acting as a rudimentary circulatory system, somehow facilitating oxygen exchange and nutrient distribution in the absence of a heart. It was a staggering thought, a biological impossibility, yet here lay the living proof. The efficiency of such a system, by all known physiological principles, should have been catastrophically insufficient to sustain even the weakest flicker of life. In hushed, clandestine meetings, Dr. Popescu consulted with a few trusted colleagues, framing Ciprian's case as a rare, hypothetical anomaly. An infant with a severely underdeveloped heart. He carefully omitted the crucial, unbelievable detail of a complete absence. Even with this cautious approach, his colleagues, learned men of their time, expressed profound skepticism. They proposed various rare cardiac malformations, from a hypoplastic left heart to complex septal defects, but dismissed the possibility of survival without any functional heart whatsoever as pure fantasy, bordering on the superstitious. Their rational, scientific minds simply could not conceive of such an existence. Frustration gnawed at Dr. Popescu. The limitations of conventional 18th century medicine were starkly evident. Undeterred, he retreated into his private library, a haven filled with the musty scent of old paper. He spent countless hours poring over historical medical texts, forgotten anatomical drawings, and even ancient philosophical treatises. He sought any mention of similar cases, any forgotten knowledge that might illuminate Ciprian's unique condition. He delved into obscure theories about vital forces, a concept often dismissed as pre-scientific mysticism, and alternative circulatory systems, pushing his scientific curiosity far beyond the accepted boundaries of contemporary medical understanding. He felt like an explorer charting an unknown sea, guided only by the flickering light of an impossible truth. Meanwhile, back in Valea Întunecată, Stefan and Anya endured weeks of agonizing suspense. Every creak of the cabin, every distant shout, sent their hearts racing, hoping for news from Sibiu. Matei, sensing his mother's abstracted worry and the absence of Dr. Popescu, became more clingy and fretful, his usual boisterous energy subdued. The villagers, ever watchful, had noticed Dr. Popescu's departure with Ciprian, their whispers renewed with a darker intensity. Some murmured that the doctor had finally acknowledged the child's unnatural origins and had taken him away for some unknown, potentially sinister purpose. The mystery of Ciprian's existence, rather than fading, continued to cast a long, unsettling shadow over the entire valley. After what felt like an eternity, Dr. Popescu returned to Valea Întunecată. His face, though weary, held a mixture of fascination and continued bewilderment. He had made some intriguing observations about Ciprian's unique vascular system, noting its intricate design and the faint, almost imperceptible pulsations. However, he remained far from a definitive explanation for the child's survival. He shared his findings with Stefan and Anya, explaining his hypothesis about the subcutaneous vessels, emphasizing it was merely a theory, unsupported by any established medical knowledge. He had no cure, no definitive answer. "I still do not understand how he survives," Dr. Popescu admitted, his voice low with a mix of scientific honesty and profound wonder. "His existence defies everything I know about the human body. But he is a remarkable child, and we must continue to observe and learn from him." His words, though lacking a solution, were a small comfort to the worried parents, validating their son's impossible existence. The mystery of Ciprian remained unsolved, a medical enigma that continued to defy all logical explanation. Dr. Popescu knew he was venturing into uncharted territory, a realm where science intertwined with the unknown, and the answers, if they existed at all, were likely to be found far beyond the familiar realms of 18th century medicine. The chilling question lingered. What unseen force sustained this boy, this fragile life born without the very engine of existence? Life in Valea Întunecată resumed its peculiar, unsettling rhythm. Ciprian was back in the small cabin, his fragile, silent presence a constant reminder of the inexplicable that resided within their humble home. Dr. Popescu, now a frequent visitor, continued his meticulous documentation of Ciprian's development and the subtle nuances of his condition. He noticed a profound responsiveness to Anya's presence and touch. When she cradled him, her soft whispers filling the small space, Ciprian's shallow breathing would often deepen almost imperceptibly. This observation suggested a vital, unspoken connection between mother and child, one that transcended mere physical proximity and hinted at a deeper emotional resonance. Stefan, burdened by the unspoken anxieties and the persistent ostracization from the village, found his solace in the relentless rhythm of farm work. The physical exertion provided a temporary escape from the gnawing fear and the hushed judgments of his neighbors. His greatest joy, however, came from watching Matei grow. Matei, now a curious and robust toddler, would often toddle over to Ciprian's cradle, his small hands reaching out with innocent curiosity to touch his seemingly lifeless brother. These moments, filled with Matei's innocent affection and unburdened by adult fears, were bittersweet for Stefan and Anya. They were a poignant reminder of the fundamental, chilling difference between their two sons, one brimming with typical vitality, the other a silent, breathing enigma. As autumn approached once more, painting the Transylvanian hills in hues of rust and gold, mirroring the season of Ciprian's birth, a subtle but unsettling change began to occur within the heartless twin. Ciprian, who had largely remained passive, a still presence in his cradle, began to exhibit brief, startling episodes of heightened activity. His large, dark eyes would suddenly dart around the room, seeming to focus intently on unseen points, as if observing something beyond the ordinary visible spectrum. His tiny limbs would twitch and jerk, with an unexpected, almost violent energy that was both surprising and deeply disturbing. These episodes were fleeting, lasting only a few seconds, but their intensity left Anya feeling increasingly uneasy. It was as if a flicker of something profound and powerful was trying to ignite within him, something that transcended mere biological function and hinted at a hidden internal struggle. Old man Grigor, observing these subtle, unnerving changes from a distance, he made sure to maintain a wide berth around the unnatural child's dwelling, declared with fervent conviction that the shadow within Ciprian was growing stronger. His ancient, fear-laden eyes held a disturbing certainty. He warned the villagers that the dormant evil, the unnatural force that sustained the child, was stirring, awakening to a new, more potent phase. He admonished them to be vigilant, to prepare for darker days. His pronouncements, delivered with the grave authority of a prophet of doom, further fueled the village's simmering fear and transformed suspicion into a palpable sense of dread. Dr. Popescu, though a man of science, could not shake the profound unease these new developments caused. He meticulously documented these new phenomena, his pen scratching furiously in his journal, desperately trying to discern if there was any discernible pattern or trigger for these strange episodes. He considered the remote possibility of neurological activity, even in the absence of a fully functioning circulatory system, a concept that defied every principle of anatomy he knew. But the fleeting, seemingly random, and increasingly intense nature of these episodes defied any easy, rational explanation, pushing him further into the realm of the unknown. One particularly cold evening, as a furious storm raged outside, lashing rain and wind against the cabin walls, Ciprian experienced his most pronounced episode of activity yet. His small body suddenly convulsed violently, his eyes wide and seemingly filled with an intense, unreadable focus, as if perceiving a dimension invisible to others. A low, guttural sound, unlike any infant cry Anya had ever heard, a sound that seemed to emanate from deep within him, escaped his lips. It was a primal, unsettling noise that sent a shiver of profound dread down Anya's spine, a sound that spoke not of innocence, but of something ancient and unknown, something utterly alien to the natural world. Stefan rushed to his wife's side, his face etched with raw fear, clutching her hand tightly. Dr. Popescu, who had been visiting that evening, watched with a mixture of intense scientific curiosity and a growing, chilling unease. The episode subsided as quickly as it had begun, leaving Ciprian limp and still once more, his shallow breaths the only sign of life. But the lingering sense of something profound and deeply disturbing having occurred hung heavy in the air, deepening the mystery surrounding the heartless twin and the unsettling, horrifying implications of his continued existence. The silence that followed was filled with unspoken questions, with a chilling suspense that promised darker revelations yet to come. Please subscribe to the channel for the next chapter in the unfolding enigma of the twins in Romania. Remember, this is a fictional story. The intense, guttural sound Ciprian had emitted, coupled with the sheer intensity of his brief, violent animation, left Anya deeply disturbed. The memory of it lingered in her mind, a discordant note in the quiet hum of her maternal instincts, fueling a growing sense of profound unease. She found herself watching him with an obsessive intensity, her eyes constantly searching for any further signs of the strange, unearthly energy that seemed to flicker within him. Each subtle twitch, each fleeting shift in his almost still gaze was scrutinized for meaning, for a hint of the terrifying truth. Dr. Popescu, equally troubled by the dramatic display he had witnessed, spent the following days in a relentless pursuit of answers, poring over his meticulously kept notes by the dim light of his study. He desperately tried to find a rational explanation for Ciprian's seemingly impossible vitality and these increasingly unusual, almost supernatural occurrences. His fingers traced the diagrams of the subcutaneous vascular network he had theorized, wondering if it could somehow be linked to a more complex, yet undiscovered physiological mechanism, perhaps a non-cardiac-driven form of circulation. He even reluctantly considered the remote, almost blasphemous possibility of some form of rudimentary nervous system operating independently of a traditional circulatory system, a concept that stretched the very boundaries of contemporary medical understanding to their breaking point. The idea was chilling, defying all known anatomy, yet Ciprian's continued existence forced him to entertain the impossible. As winter tightened its grip once more, casting the valley in a suffocating blanket of snow and ice, the isolation of Stefan and Anya intensified. The winding paths leading to their cabin were often impassable, mirroring the villagers' deliberate avoidance. Fueled by old man Grigor's increasingly dire pronouncements about the awakening of the unnatural child, the villagers now actively shunned the cabin altogether, their fear palpable, a thick, suffocating cloud. Children were warned away, and even essential trade with Stefan was conducted with a wary, hurried efficiency, their eyes never quite meeting his. One particularly bleak and silent afternoon, while Anya was nursing a content mate, she noticed Ciprian's eyes were open and fixed intently on her. This was no longer the usual vacant, unseeing stare. There was a distinct focus, an almost knowing quality in his dark gaze, as if he truly saw and understood her. As she looked back at him, a faint tremor ran through his small body, and his tiny lips seemed to twitch, almost imperceptibly, as if he were trying to form a sound, to speak. It was a subtle, fleeting moment, a mere whisper of interaction, but it left Anya with a profound and unsettling sense that Ciprian was more aware, more present, more conscious than anyone had previously dared to believe. It was a breakthrough, but one fraught with terror. She shared this observation with Stefan and Dr. Popescu, who listened with rapt attention, their faces mirroring her own mixture of awe and apprehension. Dr. Popescu, his scientific curiosity now inextricably intertwined with a growing sense of dread, began to conduct new, more focused tests. He observed Ciprian's responses to light, sound, and touch with meticulous care, his breath held in anticipation. While Ciprian still did not exhibit the typical reflexes of a healthy infant, Dr. Popescu noted subtle, yet undeniable variations in his shallow breathing and occasional muscle twitches that strongly suggested a degree of sensory processing, a rudimentary form of perception previously thought impossible. The line between a purely physiological anomaly and something far more enigmatic seemed to be blurring with terrifying speed. Could Ciprian's unusual heartless condition be fostering some form of alternative consciousness, a different way of experiencing and interacting with the world, unbound by the normal strictures of biology? The question haunted Dr. Popescu, driving him to the edge of his scientific understanding, pushing him relentlessly further into the realm of the unknown. The very definition of life itself seemed to be at stake. As the days grew shorter and the nights longer, the mystery surrounding Ciprian deepened, casting a pervasive pall of suspense and apprehension over the small cabin and the isolated village of Valea Întunecată. The heartless twin, against all odds, continued to live, his silent, unnerving existence posing a profound, terrifying challenge to the accepted understanding of life itself. What was this child? And what darker purpose did his impossible life serve? The subtle signs of Ciprian's increasing awareness continued to manifest, becoming more frequent and noticeably more pronounced. Anya, with her mother's intuition honed by constant observation, began to recognize discernible patterns in his fleeting movements and his unblinking gaze. He seemed particularly responsive to her voice. Her shallow breaths, a constant source of worry, would often become slightly deeper, almost imperceptibly so when she spoke softly or sang lullabies to him. It was a fragile, ethereal connection, easily missed by an unobservant eye, a flicker of life so subtle it could be dismissed as imagination. But for Anya, it was undeniable proof of a bond that transcended the physical, a connection between mother and son that existed despite the chilling absence of a heartbeat. Dr. Popescu, meticulously documenting these perplexing developments, his journals filling with ever more complex observations, began to consider a radical possibility. He now seriously entertained the notion that Ciprian's survival was not solely due to some yet-to-be-discovered biological anomaly, but might involve some other, as yet unknown, non-physical factor. Driven by this audacious thought, he revisited the ancient texts he had acquired, the very ones he had once dismissed as mere historical curiosities. This time, he focused intently on philosophical and even esoteric theories about the nature of life and consciousness, delving into concepts that blurred the lines between the physical and the metaphysical. He searched for any parallels or insights, however unconventional, that might offer a glimmer of understanding into Ciprian's impossible existence. Was there an anima or vital force that could sustain life even without the conventional machinery? One crisp evening, as the scent of wood smoke hung heavy in the air, Anya held Ciprian close. She noticed a faint but distinct pressure from his tiny hand against her arm. It was not a weak, involuntary spasm, nor a random brush. It was a deliberate, sustained pressure, held for a brief, significant moment before fading. She looked down at his small face, and for a fleeting, breathtaking instant, she was certain she saw the faintest hint of a smile playing on his lips, a fleeting, almost imperceptible upturn of the corners, a ghost of an expression. Tears welled up in her eyes, a mixture of profound relief and overwhelming sorrow, as she shared this moment with Stefan. It was a moment that felt like a profound breakthrough in their connection with their enigmatic son, a testament to his undeniable, though inexplicable, life. News of these subtle, yet increasingly frequent and unnerving, changes inevitably reached the ears of old man Grigore. His wizened face contorted into a mask of grim satisfaction. He interpreted them as further damning evidence of the dark force growing within Ciprian, now actively manipulating his seemingly lifeless form. His voice, once merely cautionary, now boomed with a terrifying urgency. He claimed that the abomination was not merely surviving, but drawing strength from the innocent, becoming a greater threat with each passing day. His warnings to the villagers became more frantic, predicting dire biblical consequences if they continued to allow this creature to live among them. Fear, raw and primal, began to grip Valea Întunecată once more, tightening its icy hold. The villagers whispered about the strange occurrences in Stefan's cabin, their voices hushed, their eyes wide with terror, discussing the growing malevolent power of the heartless twin. The mounting fear and suspicion in the village, a tangible, oppressive weight, began to take a severe toll on Stefan. He felt increasingly isolated and helpless, trapped between his fierce, unconditional love for both his sons and the growing, virulent hostility of his own community. He worried incessantly about Anya's declining health and Matej's safety, fearing that they too would suffer, perhaps even be harmed, for Ciprian's inexplicable, terrifying existence. The pressure was immense, a silent scream building within him. One cold, desolate night, Stefan found Dr. Popescu in his study, poring over a particularly old and leather-bound book, its brittle pages filled with strange symbols and intricate, unsettling diagrams. When Stefan inquired about it, his voice low with apprehension, Dr. Popescu explained, his own voice hushed with a mixture of fascination and unease, that it was an ancient text on natural philosophy. It contained theories about vital energies and the interconnectedness of all life, concepts that utterly predated modern scientific understanding and leaned heavily into the realm of the mystical. He admitted, with a sigh of desperation, that he was exploring these unconventional ideas out of sheer necessity, driven to the fringes of accepted knowledge by the utter lack of any scientific, rational explanation for Ciprian's continued survival. The only explanation that remained was the impossible. As the days dwindled towards the bitter end of another year, the mystery of the heartless twin remained as profound and terrifying as ever. Ciprian, defying all expectations, all logic, continued to live and, in his own subtle, unnerving way, to interact with the world around him. He left those who observed him with a growing, chilling sense that they were witnessing something truly extraordinary, something that lay far beyond the comforting grasp of their current understanding of life, death, and everything in between. The question hung heavy in the air. What was Ciprian truly becoming? The winter of 1705 descended upon Valea Întunecată with a vengeance, a relentless siege of heavy snowfalls and biting winds. The elements mirrored the escalating tension within the village, effectively isolating the community even further, physically and emotionally, echoing the profound isolation of Stefan and Anya. Yet within their small, drafty cabin, a subtle but undeniable shift was occurring in Ciprian. His interactions, though still fleeting and enigmatic, were becoming increasingly discernible, no longer easily dismissed as random movements. He would occasionally turn his head directly towards the source of sounds, his large, dark eyes seeming to linger on faces, particularly those of Anya and Matei, with an almost unnerving intelligence. It was as if a veil was slowly lifting, revealing a mind, a presence, where none should exist. One frigid morning, as Matei babbled playfully, his joyful noises filling the small space, he toddled precariously close to Ciprian's cradle. In a moment that stunned Anya and filled Dr. Popescu with a profound sense of awe, Ciprian's tiny hand reached out, not randomly, but with clear intent, and gently touched Matei's cheek. It was a deliberate gesture, a tangible moment of connection between the two brothers that brought tears, both of wonder and deep sadness, to Anya's eyes. Dr. Popescu, who witnessed the exchange, felt a wave of profound wonder wash over him. This was not a reflex. This was communication. This was undeniable, impossible interaction. Old man Grigore, however, saw these startling developments as undeniable confirmation of his most dire predictions. His face contorted with a mixture of fear and fanaticism, he claimed that the shadow within Ciprian was now seeking to influence the living, to draw strength, life, and perhaps even souls from the innocent. His fear-mongering reached a fever pitch, his pronouncements becoming increasingly desperate and inflammatory. The villagers, already gripped by superstition and escalating anxiety, began to discuss taking more drastic and violent measures. Whispers of fire and purification, of ridding their valley of this dark blight, permeated the cold winter air. Dr. Popescu, his scientific mind now grappling with concepts far beyond his textbooks, sensed the immediate and profound danger closing in on Stefan's family. He urged Stefan and Anya, with a desperate plea in his voice, to consider moving away from Valea Întunecată, at least temporarily. He believed that Ciprian, this unique and precious anomaly, needed to be studied in a more controlled, safe environment, utterly free from the suffocating prejudice and primal fear of the villagers. He offered to take them to Sibiu, where he could provide them with a secluded shelter within his own residence and continue his critical, boundary-pushing observations in secret. Stefan and Anya were torn by an agonizing decision. Leaving their ancestral home and their entire community, however hostile, was a difficult and terrifying prospect. But the escalating palpable fear surrounding Ciprian and the undeniable, increasingly subtle, yet profound, signs of his developing awareness convinced them that it was the only way to protect their family, to preserve the fragile, impossible life of their son. They knew the village would not stop. Under the desperate cover of a particularly fierce, howling storm that night, Dr. Popescu, with a sense of urgency, helped Stefan and Anya pack their few meager belongings. With Matei bundled securely, his innocent face buried against Anya's chest, and Dr. Popescu carefully, almost reverently, carrying the fragile Ciprian, they quietly slipped out of their small cabin. They left Valea Întunecată behind, its dark shadows and fearful whispers fading into the raging tempest, disappearing into the vast, unforgiving darkness of the Romanian night. As they journeyed towards Sibiu, huddled together against the elements, a complex mix of hope and trepidation filled the small group. They were leaving behind the crushing fear and bitter prejudice of the village, but they were also venturing deeper into the unknown, carrying with them the profound, unsettling mystery of the heartless twin. Sibiu offered a new beginning, but also new, unforeseen challenges. In Sibiu, Dr. Popescu established a secluded, secure space for the family within his spacious but discreet residence. He immediately resumed his meticulous study of Ciprian, now with greater access to his scientific tools and the privacy he needed. He observed a fascinating new phenomenon. Ciprian's subtle interactions and heightened awareness seemed to coincide with periods of heightened electrical activity he detected in the surrounding environment, a phenomenon he could not, for the life of him, explain with any known science. He began to hypothesize about forms of energy and communication beyond current scientific understanding, wondering if Ciprian's unique condition, his very anomaly, had somehow opened a door to these unseen realms, making him a conduit for something truly extraordinary and terrifying. The mystery of Ciprian remained unsolved, a profound enigma that continued to challenge the very definition of life itself. Was he simply a biological anomaly, a medical impossibility that had somehow, miraculously, survived through sheer chance? Or was there something far more profound at play, a deeper, perhaps cosmic connection to forces unknown, hinting at a new paradigm of existence? As they settled into their new temporary life in the bustling yet private confines of Sibiu, Stefan and Anya could only watch and wait, their lives forever intertwined with the dark, inexplicable and utterly suspenseful mystery of their son, the twin born without a heart that science, even with all its advancements, still couldn't explain. Thank you for watching the conclusion of this story. Please subscribe to the channel for more tales of mystery and suspense. Remember, this is a work of fiction.